Hi, welcome back. I'm going to share my notes today on creating my own seam binding that's been dyed, and I hope that you'll find this interesting. I played around the other day with dyeing my own seam binding, as you can see, and I started off by using the Hug Snug seam binding, and it's a rayon seam binding. It comes on spools of 100 yards, and you can pick this up on Amazon or Etsy, and it's usually between $15 and $20 for 100 yards, which is really pretty good. I cut off 5-yard increments and made a pile of seam binding. And then what I did was I used generic food coloring to do the dyeing on these, and I think they came out really, really beautiful. I'm very pleased with the results. So these pastels that you can see here in the middle were all done with a little bit more water, and then these up here in the corner, these were done with very little water. So let me explain what I mean by that. I put about 4 bowls on my kitchen counter. I spread out some protective covering just so that I wouldn't get food coloring splashed onto the counters. And then I put 4 bowls out, and I filled the bowls about halfway full with maybe a cup and a half to 2 cups of water. I added a tablespoon of vinegar to each bowl, and then I squeezed in a number of drops of each of the 4 colors. I had the green, yellow, red, and blue. So each bowl had a different color. And I'm going to say I really experimented a lot with how many drops to put in, but I'm going to say to start, I put in between 10 and 20 drops of color into each of those 4 bowls. And the results were very pastel. Okay, so what happened is I put the dye in, I had the water in there, and then I added my tablespoon of vinegar and then dropped in, for example, one of the 5-yard pieces of seam binding. I stirred it around a little bit. I even experimented with heating the bowl in my microwave just to help the rayon fibers absorb a little more quickly with the dye. But you don't have to. You can leave them on the counter and just let them sit for longer periods of time without heating them. So that worked out just fine. The other thing I did was I played around with some of the colors using neutrals. And what I mean by that is, for example, if you have a blue dye in your bowl and you put just a drop or so, or maybe a little more, of the color that is on the complete opposite side of the color wheel from that color. So blue's complement or opposite is orange. So I just put a couple of drops of red and yellow into the blue dye. When I was finished dyeing my blue colors, I altered by adding just a small amount of the opposite color, and then I was able to get a more grayed down or neutral tone of that blue. So an example would be, I have here this pale green, which I did with the green dye, and when I was done dyeing with the green, I put in a new piece, adding just a tiny drop of red, right? Because red in the complement for green is red. So by adding the complement, just put 1 drop of red, and you can see that it dulled it down just a little bit. So the one on the left has a drop of red added. The one on the right is just the pure green dye. Okay, so you can change your colors and get more neutral tones by adding just a drop or 2 of that opposite color. Okay, another example would be yellow. So you could take your yellow and then add just a drop of purple, okay, down here, because it's opposite on the color wheel. Okay, and that will help you to give you a more neutral tone. Okay, so those are the pastels, and you can see there's quite a range of different ones. I played around with mixing the primary colors and to get these different dyes. And then, of course, these were using much less water. So these are what I would call like a low immersion dye. So into my clean bowl, I would place um, I want to say maybe 20 drops, give or take. 20, maybe 20 drops of yellow. Add my tablespoon of vinegar, and then just maybe a tablespoon of water. Stir that up, then drop in your seam binding, and then I just, in the bowl, I squished it up. I had rubber gloves on my hands, squished it all into the dye, made sure the dye was, dispersed evenly on the seam binding. And then I squeezed it out completely in the sink to get the excess dye out, and then hung these up to dry on a clothes drying rack that I had in my tub up in the bathroom, just so that none of the drips would go on, onto the floor. Okay, so these are the results of doing that. I especially love this green one. Isn't that pretty? So this was green with just a drop or two of blue and some drops of yellow. Okay, and then again, the tablespoon of water and the tablespoon of vinegar. The vinegar kind of helps to set the dye and help the dye be accepted a little more quickly onto the fiber. Oh, I just love these. So again, I'm going to play around some more with these when I have some time next week, and maybe try to create some more neutrals. See if I can get some, grays and browns, and kind of go from there. So this is my experiment that I think these came out really well, and hopefully if this is something that interests you, you can give it a try in your own kitchen. All right, take care. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.